guys, and happy Friday. Welcome to Unapologetic Live. I'm your host, Amala Benobi. Taylor sitting in the hot seat today. And Scott's in the producer's bay.
Heyo.
Hi. So, today, we're going to be reviewing a movie that we all begrudgingly watched.
So fun. Why do I let you do these things to me?
I'm just like the puppet master at this point. But I saw a lot of people talking about this film that recently came out on Hulu called Not Okay, and we'll get into the synopsis of it. There will be spoilers ahead, so if you have not watched the film and you plan on watching it and you don't want anything spoiled, this might not be the episode for you. But I saw it was really popular among millennial and Gen Z people who were watching this and going, this film is such an interesting commentary on politics and social media and influencer culture and all these fun little things that I was seeing on the internet. So I figured we would hop in and watch it since politics, Gen Z, and influencer culture and social media is sort of in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I'm not used to looking at the Gen Z's own takes about itself, basically, is
right.
and the world that their own portrayal or their own understanding of the world that they live in, and it was an interesting look, to say the least.
Yes, it was. I will say, if nothing else, it kept my attention throughout the whole film, and I was able to watch all the way through without getting bored. But before we get into our commentary, guys, please like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time we go live. That is typically at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and every time we post a short clip or shorts for you guys. Now, let's get into talking about Not Okay. All right, so Not Okay focuses around a young girl played by Zoe Dutch. Her name is Danny in this movie. Danny happens to be a very self-centered photo editor who's working at a media outlet of the name Depravity. Very, very much on the nose here. But Danny has other aspirations and ambitions. She wants to be a very famous writer. How she gets there is not very wholesome. One day she decides, because her guinea pig gives her the idea, we'll maybe talk about that later, she's going to Photoshop pictures of herself in Paris and post them on the internet saying that she's at a writer's retreat. Little does she know that minutes after posting that video or that picture on Instagram, Paris is going to experience a string of terrorist attacks and her phone is going to blow up with people being concerned about her whereabouts and how she's doing. Now, Danny, instead of saying, you know what, guys, I posted these fake pictures of myself in Paris, I wasn't actually there, leans into the false narrative and starts pretending that she is a survivor of terrorist attacks. She wants to become a writer in this way, write an article about it, ends up going to a support group where she meets other survivors of vicious attacks, one in particular by the name of Rowan Aldrin, who is a young woman who has survived a school shooting and lost her sister in the process of that school shooting. So Danny and Rowan become very quick friends. Rowan helps her write a famous article that goes out with the hashtag I am not okay, and hashtag I am not okay becomes a trend all over the world with young Gen Z people hopping on the internet to talk about how they're actually feeling. Danny rises to fame and hops onto Rowan's already famous activist route, and they start working together as a famous pair of activists when it comes to things like violence and terrorism. Obviously, this all falls apart when Danny is exposed by a coworker who finds out she's lied about being in Paris, and Danny has no redemption arc in this movie whatsoever. It goes viral that she has lied because she is forced to admit the lie. She gets hated on and told she's a girl who benefits from white privilege and that she's a liar, and becomes an international icon for being somebody who is deceptive and lied about being part of a terrorist attack. And Rowan goes on to perform a very famous poem where she says, basically, F you, Danny, I do not forgive you, I am a victim, you are not, and we'll both go our separate ways. And that's how the movie ends.
That was very well done, Amala. You're getting really good at these synopses.
I'm working on it. Once we get a few more under our belt, I'm just going to be banging these out. So let's talk about it. Like, what are some of the major themes that you guys recognized in this film, other than just the general air of wokeness?
I would say definitely victimhood, trauma, and trauma being your source of power or something that can you can weaponize to become your voice, and the social media influencer culture, just a critique of that, the nihilism of Gen Z. But more than anything, there's nothing worse than a fake woke person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would also add to that the conflation of love with fame, likes, and everything on social media at large. I think that's essentially what Taylor was talking about right there.
I think, well, let's start with the social media point. Like, throughout this entire film, everybody is connected to social media in some way, shape, or form. It's very, like I said, very on the nose that she works for a journalistic media outlet, if we want to go and really call what they're doing journalism, but called depravity. They're trying to make it very clear throughout the film that social media is something that can sort of degrade the mind and degrade people's authenticity. And throughout it, Danny is not the only person lying on social media and constantly connected to it. You'll see people filming everything throughout the film, and that's a constant feature. It's just people filming what's happening in front of them with their smartphones, as well as a male character, well, probably an antagonist is what they would deem in this movie, who Danny is somewhat in love with, named Colin, who is a just utterly fake media influencer with a fake accent, and then goes to fake parties surrounded by fake people. So that's a clear theme throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and to be fair, and maybe something in the movie's favor, is that it does kind of accurately portray the reality of that world and the influence of social media culture, and how it makes this FOMO culture, this I'm going to perform up my life to try to get likes and clicks. And like, I think we've seen studies where X% of Gen Z wants to be some kind of TikTok star or
one in
social
four
media influencer. 1 in 4?
Yeah. The Hill came out with an
insane.
article this week, I think 2 days ago, talking about that. That's mind-blowing.
It's insane.
It's
Why
like
wouldn't you want that? Yeah.
In the world that we're living in, when you grow up with, it's like, what else is there to aspire to? Like the traditional things of like wanting to, I don't know, go out and accomplish things, build a family, build a career, that seems to not have as much appeal as just, hey, I can be like one of these famous YouTubers or TikTok stars who's living in the mansion in the Hollywood Hills and hanging out with all the cool people. So anyway, I think the movie effectively captures that culture, but it's really not ultimately a commentary on that.
No, it's kind of like a subtext throughout the entire film. But they do, like Taylor said, they do quite literally nail that. She goes to an influencer party, and it's sponsored by this dental company, and they have the influencer sit down and pop in the little dental application, and they take pictures, and then they move on to the next and move on to the next. So they do truly understand sort of like the factory settings of being an influencer and being on social media. Outside of that, let's go into, Danny's descent into madness when she lies about being part of this terrorist attack. And there's this phrase that's used throughout the film of the internet turns victims into villains. And Danny's whole storyline in this movie ends up being a person who's apparently a villain being turned into a victim through this false storyline. And like Taylor said, it's sort of taking down people and saying, if you're not really woke, if you're not really a victim, if you're not really part of a minority group, you have no place in the conversation, or at least if you do, your place is on the outskirts, so stay in your lane.
Right. So when she stumbles into witnessing this terrorist attack, or sort of being a trauma survivor, all of a sudden she's got a golden ticket to being accepted, being in the in-group, finding that fame, finding that attention, finding that sympathy that she's always wanted. Right. And so, rather than, like you said, doing the right thing, she leans into that and owns it, and just rides it as far as it'll take her.
Yeah. And I feel like this movie could have been a critique on that system. Like, Rowan's character is a girl who happened to be at a school that got shot up, happened to lose her sister in that fight, and in that just take a clear route straight into stardom. You could critique that so hardcore and say, like, we should not be making celebrities out of these kids who have been victimized by our culture or by somebody else, because when you do that, they attach themselves to that victimhood. And Rowan's character throughout the film is so attached to her victimhood, and obviously it's a very traumatic experience to go through, and nobody can speak to an experience like that, but there's this clear message of no, she's going to be attached to this for the rest of her life. It's going to be a driving force in everything that she does for the rest of her life. And she's going to gain celebrity because of that. People want to hear from her because they want to hear about this traumatic event that has happened to her because it's so far removed from anything they've ever experienced in their lives. And you could have gone, that's kind of gross. That's kind of gross.
It totally gave me Greta Thunberg vibes.
Right.
This young child is paraded out there, and just the more angry you can be, the more authentic and inspiring your message is. And it's like, how dare you? I mean, that was totally the same vibe I was getting from. And by the way, like you did experience something traumatic, and you should it's right to be angry. But we talk about this on the show all the time when we hear like some of these radical leftists go on these viral screeds. We're like, just because you're angry, it doesn't mean you're right or that you have the right solution. We should feel passionate and we should care, but we should also not let that overcome logic. And so but the movie doesn't leave room for that. The movie's just like, get traumatized, weaponize that trauma, and use it to be an angry activist. And that is the hero, is the person who's an activist.
Yeah, completely. It's insane that there was a line within the movie that directly spoke to that. It was, your pain is your biggest asset, your greatest asset. That's just a recipe for pursuit with anger, teaming anger, pursuing everything you do in life and trying to succeed. And to your point, I don't think you can almost flip that phrase on its head. The internet makes victims into villains. It's like, I don't think they realized they were also pushing the message of the internet also makes villains into kings and queens. And that's to your point earlier, is what people are pursuing on these platforms.
Yeah, there was no message of like, I know something horrible happened to you, but how do we work through this? How do we work through this? In fact, the film being named Not Okay, I should explain. Obviously, we explained it's because of that hashtag, I am not okay. But it also drives in this idea that, I know you're trying to lead your normal lives, guys, but if you're not okay, you hop up and you scream that you're not okay. And it precipitates into this huge internet trend where everybody is jumping on the internet talking about why they're not okay, talking about everything that's wrong with their lives, talking about all the trauma they're working through. And in some ways, it's fine. Like, it's fine to acknowledge those things. But the message was not like, let's work through this. Yeah. The message was like, no, you're not okay. You're going to stay not okay. You are a victim, and you're going to stay a victim.
Exactly. It could have been, like, this movie could have been so many things. It could have been a critique of this victimhood culture, but instead it enshrined it, and it said it's a good thing for you to be a victim, and you should lean into that and own it, and your worth and your identity should be attached to your victimhood. Right. And it's not about moving you back toward, if you experience trauma, reintegrating you into a healthy life and healthy relationships and a healthy purpose. It's about internalizing your trauma, leaning into and drawing from the anger from it. It's like I was getting like Star Wars Sith Lord vibes from it.
Exactly. Your pain is your greatest asset. Yeah. That's 100% the Sith way.
Feel your anger. It's like, exactly. So draw from your trauma and then become an activist. And that is literally the message of the film. Be not okay, and then use that to be an activist. And the worst thing you could do is just be like a normal person who has a healthy life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the movie opens up by warning the audience, you're going to meet an unlikable female protagonist during this film. And when you watch Danny, I didn't feel really any hate towards this girl watching it. I didn't feel like she was particularly unlikable, other than the ways that they very on the nose tried to make her be unlikable. She's somewhat self-centered. She ignores people that don't serve her and don't serve a purpose in her growth towards fame and being this writer. So in those ways, she is unlikable. But what I just recognize is Danny is wholeheartedly a product of everybody else who is around her in this film, and the people around her, exactly. And all the people around her in this film who are contributing to the creation of this girl are just completely redeemable. They've done nothing wrong because they are actually parts of a minority group. And you can see Danny, who's just like this normal girl. She was raised in a 2-parent household. Her parents clearly have a lot of money. And because of the culture that is created with wokeness, she is chasing victimhood. There's this part where she's in an elevator talking to 2 queer coworkers of hers, and they're like, hey, we have a queer bowling thing that we're going to, and they're talking about it in the elevator, and she's like, oh, I want to go. I want to go. And they're like, it's only for queer people. She's like, I kissed a girl once in college. Does that count as anything? And they're like, no, Danny, you're not bisexual. You're not a part of this group. And then she stumbles into being a part of the survivors group when she posts this picture on Instagram of her being in Paris. So she's just constantly chasing, trying to be a part of a minority group, which is clearly like the cool and fun thing to do in the modern day.
Yeah, like there's no way to be in unless you somehow get traumatized or unless you somehow become oppressed in some way. It's ultimately, I was laughing with Scott because it's like all this stuff always ends up back, I mean, I always say it, but it ends up back in like a Marxist worldview of oppressors and oppressed. And so there's no way to be in the in-group unless you have some form of oppression, or else the best you can do is just shut up and be an ally. And she didn't. That's not where she was at the beginning of the movie, or at least not well enough. She wasn't aware of that. Yep. And I guess that's the lesson she learned by the end of it, or was supposed to learn. Right. But at no point is it this come into a healthy world where each person is an individual and we can contribute our own ideas and to the world and negotiate your identity with the real world. It's all about what intersectional oppression group do you fall into, and then you be an activist and try to take down the big scary system of patriarchal oppression that's up there. It's the same old stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy too, because you think about, you were bringing up, just shut up and be an ally, right? I feel like this was almost an unintended message toward those allies out there who are supporting, say, BLM and all the other movements out there, feminism, what have you. And I feel like this was a weird message to white women at large, who are, quote unquote, of the oppressed group of females out there and fighting against the patriarchy. But it was also like this message to them, like, hey, you are cannibalizing our status, meaning a black female status in Rowan here. You're cannibalizing our status by doing what you're doing, and it's time for you to take a seat. Like, you need to take a seat. Even though you're oppressed, you're not as oppressed as us.
Exactly. Like we were talking this morning, Drew Barrymore was trending on Twitter. Trending on Twitter because Drew Barrymore posts this picture of her frolicking in the rain. And apparently...
she was expressing black joy, Amala. That's black joy. She was appropriating it.
Apparently that trend, frolicking in the rain and laughing about it and saying, go out in the rain, is a black thing to do on TikTok. And Drew Barrymore is not black, so she's appropriating black joy.
Yeah, it's, again, joy is a human universal. Like, there's no such thing as, I mean, a black person can have joy and express that in a uniquely cultural way or whatever, but it's okay to express joy. You don't have a monopoly on frolicking in the rain. Right. That's a very strange worldview, but anyways.
It's just insane.
But this movie very much lives in that logic.
Yes, it does. It does. And throughout this, most of the film is clearly a critique on white liberalism and white people who claim to be a part of the movement but don't truly understand what they're doing. And then, of course, the separate critique of people being willing to lie about victimization in order to gain fame. But on the outskirts of it, they are little jabs to conservatives, because they have to put that in there. They have to make sure they let everybody know that, I know they're not the focus of this movie, but still, F you guys. So while Danny and Rowan go to a protest of some sort, a rally surrounding gun violence and terrorism, while they're on stage, these white male conservative men throw little poppers, what do you call them?
Fireworks.
Yeah, little fireworks down at their feet and trigger Rowan's PTSD from her school shooting. And then they call them little liberal snowflakes and say, look, snowflakes are so easy. And somebody videotapes Rowan experiencing her PTSD and having an anxiety attack, and it goes all over the internet, where conservatives are hopping on and saying, you guys are libtards, you guys are so sensitive, I can't believe something like this affected you. And Rowan says, the alt-right is going to crucify me for this.
Yeah, very on the nose. I will say, this movie I was going along with it. I was okay with it. I was like, okay, it's kind of like a Gen Z Mean Girls with, obviously a little bit of the woke stuff, but it's I'm here. But when it got to this scene of first of all, the caricature of the guy saying, take this, snowflakes, libtards, and dropping fireworks. I'm not saying, okay, there's maybe a world in which that happens. I guess it's not totally unreal.
Right.
But then the next scene, Rowan's in her hospital bed, and Zoe's character, Danny, comes and visits her, and she's basically saying, no one's going to take me seriously anymore. I've lost the strength of my message because I had my panic attack and my anxiety attack when they popped off these fireworks. And I was just like, no one, people, the internet in the world that we live in is only going to take you more seriously because of that. That only makes you more authentically a victim, and pretending like you don't know that, well, just as where like the realism of the movie was completely lost on me. I'm like, she has to be aware that that this is, I mean, like in the same way, because it contradicts the own logic of the movie, because in the same way that Danny seizes on her own victimhood, Rowan is completely ignorant of it. It's like, come on, we know what's going on here. This is, and it's not to say like, okay, yes, people can experience a panic attack and after being triggered by their PTSD, like that's a horrible thing. But just for the movie to then go from like, oh, this woman's so pure, she would never even, she would think that her whole message is lost after this. I was like, no.
It's the same woman who says the pain is your greatest strength. And then she goes through this thing and goes, people are going to hate me because of this.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like, as long as emotion is attached to it, then it's validated. It's like, and the more emotion and the more anger and the more pain that you have, the more validated it is, the better it is, the higher pedestal it's placed upon.
It's actually, very right. Very much right. And you can tell just like some characters who haven't gone through as much pain are just sort of like pushed to the side a little bit. There's a guy in the support group who was present at the Ariana Grande concert that got bombed, and they're just like, he's funny.
Yeah. And it was kind of ironic too that there's a guy who I incorrectly thought was going to be the love interest at the very beginning, the coworker who's like of Indian South Asian descent.
Kelvin.
Yeah, Kelvin. And they like keep forgetting his name, and he's like this forgettable character. And I was like, that's interesting that they just make this minority who's supposed to be somebody who's in the oppressed, but maybe just because he's a man, he's like a forgettable thing. And maybe they're just really trying to box out. Right. They didn't let any strong male characters in this movie, or any like important characters that are male at all. Her dad was a total like emotional wreck simp, and
crying and babbling like I just did like the whole time. It's just it's horrible stuff. There was also something too, we were talking about, when they threw the fireworks and everything. Before that all happened, before Danny went with Rowan to that entire rally, remember she was like, hey, I would love to perform with you. There's something to that word usage, the performance of it all. It's this sort of just staged, look at me. I may be promoting this message, but the fact that they use the word performance, I don't know if it's because they wanted to show that the white woman just can't understand that it's not a performance. This is like my truth, in their words. But it's also it's interesting because like when all of this went down and Danny was exposed, remember she wrote the note saying like, Rowan, I will do better. That's very much the message of like all allies, especially during BLM, those who kneeled. It's this self-flagellation in the public square that, I will change for the better, even though I'll never understand. I will start to change. And it's like the wokeism religion and people paying penance to the woke religion, the woke God. It's so strange.
But there is actually no forgiveness for you and no redemption for you. And like there, even the movie itself, in their little title cards in between segments, it's kind of segmented off. And the last one is, I don't get a redemption arc. And I thought it was really interesting how she wrote her apology publicly, and it was very like inauthentic, and people kind of just wrote it off and piled on her, so they didn't take her apology seriously. And then when it was time for her to apologize to Rowan, and she had the note written out on her phone, I think they deliberately let you read the note a little bit, and it just feels like a very generic, like vanilla sort of like, I promise to do better, you're so great, all this stuff that like the basic white girl would say. But she doesn't even have the opportunity to deliver that apology, because it's like she realizes how either she realizes how unimportant it is, or the movie's just trying to communicate that like, we don't want to hear your your apology. We don't want to hear your
Right.
apology. If you're a privileged person, it doesn't matter. Your voice has been the voice long enough. You just need to uncenter yourself. Let her take the stage, literally, metaphorically, and get out of the way. And no one cares about your apology. She's not going to accept it anyway. She just said we will never be okay, and that's just a perfect metaphor for the woke world, in which no matter how apologetic you may be, you're not. It's not going to be enough. The best you can hope for is just being an ally that is quietly, uncentering yourself and going out and making movies like this, and that is like the best you can hope for is you engaging in this performative activism and making your whole life a meaning around reinforcing these narratives. It's not about actually creating a healthy world where people are forgiven, where people are restored to healthy relationships, where people can be redeemed and continue on with their lives and find meaning and undo some of the damage that they've done. None of that is anywhere in the cards. It's all just like join the movement or shut up and just get in our wake, and that's it.
Yeah, that
get
really
woke
is.
or get out.
Yeah. And Danny virtually in this film, I think she does virtually everything wrong in this film. And it's not to say that anything that she did is like justifiable in any way, shape, or form.
She's a horrible person.
She did horrible things and a horrible person. But yeah, there is a clear message of like, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life, and you're going to be doing learning surrounding this for the rest of her life. I think the only person who forgave her by the end of the film was actually her father, who ends up hugging her. But there is a clear message of like, you're going to live with this for the rest of her life. At one point, her mom's like, I don't know how you're going to ever get a job. I don't know what we're going to do about this. Like, your life is going to be over. All these things.
Weird. Like, she asked her mom if she would could have a cup of hot cocoa to comfort her. And the mom just threw a packet on her. Which is like, okay, I get you need to feel the rate of your actions, but also like, she's getting death threats and doxxed, and she's retreating to the safety of her home. Like, you're the only people she has in the world to turn to. Like, you can give a little bit of comfort. And it was the movie letting the dad be the one to accept her and forgive her, just a way of saying the old white man is always going to be okay with keeping things how they are and going to accept you if you don't become woke.
I saw it as like the effeminate man being the one to accept and to care for and to cuddle with to keep you safe. It's just like another chop at the knees for masculinity. Who the two roles would be switched with the mother and the father usually. So there was that
her mom definitely wore the pants.
Yeah.
Like definitely was like stoic and strong, and the father's just constantly just in an emotional
wreck.
Yeah. But
like Bob in Fight Club.
But outside of political commentary on this movie wasn't great. Like, even if I was going into this with the woke mindset, this movie was not great. The driving force for plot advancement, where Danny even gets the idea to fake going to Paris, is her guinea pig running across her keyboard and accidentally photoshopping a photo of her.
I gotta give credit to the name Ginny Weasley. That made me laugh. I loved that. As a Harry Potter fan.
Yeah, my wife nudged me. She's like, hey, Ginny Weasley.
I get it too.
At least there's that. There's that.
I mean, I honestly, like, it could have been okay. It was not okay.
But it was not okay.
It could have been. But
the acting was left.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been like a more traditional, like I said, like a Mean Girls, but updated for this generation.
Sure.
It could have been a commentary on social media culture. It could have been a commentary on victimhood culture. But it just had to be a woke message, or just a woke worldview message, and everything else that it could have been was kind of just lost in that for me. And so I don't know. I was okay with, and I thought it was actually like a good like storyline to say, okay, this writer desperately wants attention. She lies about being a victim. All this stuff, like that's an inherently interesting story. Some of the writing was a little on the nose, over and over again, with like the caricaturing of the conservatives and I don't know, of the naming of the place that she worked. But all in all, and just like how like obviously Pete Davidson, Justin Bieber, the influencer guy was.
We didn't even hit on the political gentrification was also a note in this film too. But you'll see that.
Yeah,
it's
there was
very
like
much
a
in the
fancy
beginning.
coffee shop that had a homeless person right outside of it in that neighborhood, and the homeless person's like the one who understands what's going on.
Right, and the influencers go for matcha, but they're like, ugh, I don't live here. Live here? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But there's things.
Yeah, there's like there was enough there to like make a decent like satire of the times and like a fun coming of age movie. But again, like even Mean Girls, there's totally redemption arc. There's totally like a good lesson to be learned. There's totally like her making amends for the wrongs that she's done and being reintegrated. And there's like a hopeful, narrative. And this one is just like, be an activist.
Yeah. And be a real
or shut up if
activist.
you're privileged.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. The overarching like concept of someone being so like needy for attention and so like the lengths that they'll go to get that. I think that's an interesting concept, especially in today's day and age, and like embedding that into social media, and then having something as horrible as a terrorist attack happen. I mean, those are great. Those are great storylines. The issue is like they shoved every leftist tentpole talking point into the story, and I think that ultimately just jumbled it all because like while they had all the tentpoles, there was no depth to any of those tentpoles. Besides maybe the allyship and those things like that that kind of got across more than other things. You had
like the gun control.
Exactly, the gun control came in. You could throw in the abortion was sprinkled in there a little bit with just how blasé she was about Plan B and whatnot. And obviously that's a much larger and deeper issue at large that needs to be discussed. And it was just like flippantly thrown in there.
Yep. I would say if you want the story structure, like of the plot and what Danny is experiencing, but you want it done well, Dear Evan Hansen is the way to go. And it's exactly very similar plot structure to this, very similar situation for the protagonist, but actually in a redeemable arc. Watch it as either the movie or the musical, although I do recommend the musical. But it's I would be actually not shocked at all to hear that this movie was heavily inspired by Dear Evan Hansen because it's very, very similar and just a great value version of it. Yeah. But anyways, I think that sums up our thoughts. We have to score the film as a film itself outside of politics.
Okay.
What are we thinking out of 10?
I'm gonna give that a 3.5.
3.5. 4.5. Like I said, kept my attention. I was never bored.
Yeah, I mean, it had me like 75% of the way through. I was still kind of like, okay, but then whenever they took off the mask and revealed the true colors, it was like, okay, that just kind of poisoned the whole well for me. So I don't know. I'll be a little more generous and give it a 5.
Okay, 5, and then woke scoring.
Meter.
What is the woke score? Is it 10 out of 10 means it's really woke, or is it 0 out of 10 because it's so woke it's just bad?
I think 10 out of 10 means it's really woke.
Okay, so how woke is it? I mean, God.
It's up there, man. I think it's honestly like an 8.5 and 9. It's pretty woke.
Yeah, just because everything that happens is really just like backdrop against which the woke message can come across.
Right.
It's like a 10.
Yeah.
That was the point that this movie was made.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it's just like full force. There's points in the film where they literally say, I hate straight people. There's points in the film where it's like, oh yeah, it's so fun to be a minority. It's just very, very clear.
Well,
very present.
In a way, she's a caricature of a person who's like a falsely woke.
Yeah.
It's not even, this movie's not even anti-conservative, and I mean obviously with the
just a little.
Portraying the caricature of the conservatives and the alt-right guys and all that, and the internet trolls and whatnot. Like it's funny because that's like how they view conservatives.
That's all that we are.
Yeah. But it's really like Zoe's character represents just the person who's insufficiently woke and insufficiently apologetic for her privilege.
Yep.
And doesn't get how to be a true activist.
Yeah. This is
Scott.
Definitely a 10 out of 10 on the woke meter.
Wow,
Like,
10 out of 10. I wanted to leave room for like growth. I want to leave room to be wowed by something else.
Well, there's also the fact that Quinn Shepard, I believe she wrote and directed it. She's actually engaged or married to the character that said, I hate straight people in the elevator. So like when I found out like all that information, it was kind of just like, okay, this person is definitely coming from a single lens viewpoint, and there's really no deviating from it. It's like I had a hard time finding anything outside of that viewpoint.
Yeah, like for the Nope movie review, we reacted to some stuff that Jordan Peele had said, and this and that does color your interpretation of the film because you get to hear from the horse's mouth like what they intended you to get in this film. And I did look at a couple of things that she said, and I mean, there's one picture of her saying like the future of film is female on her shirt though she's directing, and of course but one of the things she said was like she wanted people to see themselves in Danny's character a little bit and contest this, so they deliberately made her relatable so that you had to like contend with that, and which to a degree I think is a healthy thing. But if what you mean in an ultimate sense is like, do I need to be the white ally who shuts up and lets uncenters myself and lets the activist take center stage and just support them? That's again like that's what I should be looking for. Okay, nope. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, it's weird too, because if that was her goal, it was like, should everybody somehow relate to the fact that they hate themselves? Because Danny clearly did not like herself, her situation, her life, and the way in which she went about changing it. Like, is that what we're supposed to see in each other? And I mean, or in ourselves? And I don't know. That's such a seedy, greasy message to me.
And it's very hopeless. It leaves, okay, if I'm supposed to see myself in her, like, where am I supposed to go at the end of this? And again, it's the activism and taking a back seat rather than making amends for the pain that you've caused or becoming a better person. That's not the goal. The goal is not to become a better person or improve or learn from your mistakes or heal broken relationships or move on and find a new path and meaning in your life that eliminates being a terrible person. It's just about the lesson you need to learn is sit down and shut up. And like, so if I relate to Danny, then that's I'm just the privileged white guy who needs to, I shouldn't be talking anymore. Uncensor myself. I'm going to take the stage.
Hashtag we are not okay after watching that. Okay. No, we're doing just fine. So an interesting movie with tangled, woke themes and an apparently unlikable protagonist. Those are our thoughts on Not Okay. If you guys watched the film, drop your thoughts down below and let us know how you felt about it. What is your film score? What's your woke score? We would love to know and love to hear from you. Get your perspective. Did you like it? Did you not like it? And if you haven't watched Not Okay yet, are you going to watch it after our review of the movie? Maybe just for giggles? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like what we talked about today, please like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time we go live and every single time we post a new video for you guys. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Bye guys.